If you told me a year ago that I'd be in a bitter war with my HOA over a stolen ATV, and that the thief would be the neighborhood queen bee's daughter, I would have laughed in your face. I moved to Maplewood Estates for peace and quiet, not drama. But drama, it turns out, has a way of finding you, especially when someone like Karen Monroe lives 3 houses down. Maplewood is one of those manicured suburban neighborhoods you see in real estate commercials. White picket fences, neatly trimmed lawns, American flags fluttering on porches. It's the kind of place where neighbors wave as they pass, kids ride bikes until dusk, and the HOA board thinks it's the second coming of Congress. I bought my 2-story house here after 12 years in the Army and a rough divorce. I wanted a fresh start, a place where my 10-year-old son, Luke, and I could build a life without chaos. For a while, we got just that. Most mornings, I'd be up at 6, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise spill gold over the cul-de-sac. Luke would still be asleep, sprawled across his Star Wars sheets, and I'd use that time to work on my pride and joy, a cherry-red Polaris Sportsman ATV I'd saved for years to buy. That machine wasn't just a toy. It was my escape. On weekends, Luke and I would trailer it out to the trails near Pine Hollow and spend hours tearing through mud and climbing rocky paths. Out there, with the wind in our faces and nothing but pine-scented air around us, we felt free. The ATV sat in my garage most days, covered and locked, but sometimes I'd park it on the driveway after a ride to hose it down. That's when I first noticed her. Her name was Madison Monroe, 15, bleach blonde, expensive sneakers, and an attitude that could curdle milk. She was Karen's daughter, the self-appointed first family of Maplewood. Karen herself was a legend in the HOA. Sharp bob haircut, pearl earrings, and a voice that could slice steel. If the HOA rules were the Bible, Karen was both Moses and God. She was the one who fined me $150 last year because my trash can was visible from the street for more than 6 hours. She called Luke's treehouse a structural violation. She once told me my truck lowered the property values because it was too rugged. But Madison was worse. She strutted around the neighborhood like she owned it, hanging out with older boys, vaping behind the playground, and blasting TikTok dances in the cul-de-sac. Everyone knew she was trouble, but Karen brushed it off with the same excuse every time. She's just expressing herself. The first time she saw the ATV, she stopped dead on the sidewalk and stared. "Cool ride," she said, popping her gum, her voice dripping with entitlement. "Thanks," I said, rinsing mud from the tires. "My boyfriend's got one just like it," she added, though I doubted that was true. "Good for him," I muttered. She lingered, circling it like a hawk. "Bet this thing goes fast." "Fast enough," I said. She grinned. "Maybe you'll let me take it for a spin sometime." "Not a chance," I said, firm and final. Her smile vanished. She gave me a look, a cold, defiant glare that said, "You'll regret that." Then she turned and walked off without another word. I didn't think much of it at the time. Teenagers say dumb things. But something about the way she looked at that ATV made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Life went on. Work at the auto shop kept me busy. Luke started 5th grade, and the crisp bite of fall rolled in. We rode the ATV every other weekend, and I kept it locked in the garage with a heavy chain and a reinforced door. I wasn't paranoid, just careful. Out here, garage break-ins weren't common, but they happened. Then, one Thursday afternoon in late October, everything changed. I came home from work around 6:30, bone-tired and smelling like motor oil. Luke was at his mom's for the weekend, so the house was quiet. I cracked open a beer, stepped into the garage to grab a wrench, and froze. The ATV was gone. The space where it always sat was empty, a square of oil-stained concrete and nothing else. The chain I'd wrapped through the wheels was lying on the floor, cut clean through. My heart slammed against my ribs. I ran out to the driveway, scanning the street. Nothing. No trailer, no tracks, no sign of anything unusual. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and called 911. "Maplewood Estates, Unit 347, I told the dispatcher. "Someone broke into my garage and stole my ATV." Officers showed up about 20 minutes later, 2 young deputies with notepads and calm faces. They looked over the cut chain, took photos, and asked the usual questions. Any idea who might have wanted it? One asked. No, I lied automatically. Madison's face flashed in my mind, but accusing a teenager without proof would make me look paranoid. Any cameras? Just the Ring doorbell, I said. But the garage is on the side. It doesn't face the street. They promised to file a report, told me they'd be in touch, and drove off into the night. I stood in the empty garage long after they left, staring at the space where my ATV should have been. Anger boiled beneath my skin, sharp and bitter. It wasn't just about the machine. It was about what it meant, the weekends with Luke, the blood and sweat I'd put into affording it, the one thing that was truly mine after the divorce. Someone had ripped that from me. And deep down, I had a gut feeling who. The next morning, I decided to talk to Karen. She was out front watering her hydrangeas, wearing a white tracksuit and oversized sunglasses like she was heading to a country club. Madison was beside her, glued to her phone. Karen, I called as I walked up the driveway. She turned, her smile polite and thin. Oh, Daniel. What a surprise. Everything all right? No, not really. I crossed my arms. My ATV was stolen last night. Her eyebrows shot up, but there was a glimmer in her eyes, not shock, but interest. Oh my goodness, she said with a hand to her chest. That's terrible. Yeah. Whoever did it cut through a steel chain and broke into my garage. Such a shame. This neighborhood used to be so safe, she said, shaking her head. Still is, I said, locking eyes with Madison, who was pretending not to listen. Unless the thief is someone local. Karen's smile tightened. Are you implying something? I'm just saying, I replied slowly. Someone around here seemed awfully interested in my ATV recently. Madison looked up then, meeting my gaze without a flicker of guilt. Are you talking about me? She said, her tone sharp. If the shoe fits, I said. Karen gasped. How dare you accuse my daughter of theft? I didn't accuse anyone, I said calmly. I'm just asking questions. Karen stepped closer, lowering her voice. Let me be clear, Daniel. My daughter is not a criminal. She's a straight A student and a good person. If you're going around spreading rumors like this, I will take legal action. I'm not spreading anything, I said, fighting to keep my temper in check. But if she is involved, you'd better hope the cops find out before I do. Her eyes narrowed. Watch yourself, she hissed. This isn't the kind of neighborhood where wild accusations go over well. I walked away before I said something I'd regret. But the encounter only cemented what I already suspected. Madison had something to do with it. 2 days later, I got my first real lead. I was driving home from work, still fuming over the lack of progress in the investigation, when I saw something that made my stomach drop. 3 blocks from my house, in a small clearing near the woods, a group of teenagers was gathered around something red and familiar. My ATV. I slammed on the brakes and pulled over. It was definitely mine. Same model, same custom sticker Luke and I had put on the side. Madison was there, laughing with 2 older boys, sitting right on the damn thing like she owned it. Rage exploded inside me. I stormed across the grass. Get the hell off my ATV. The laughter stopped. Madison turned, her smirk fading as she saw me. Whoa, chill out, she said. That's mine, I snapped. You stole it. Prove it, one of the boys sneered. I don't need to prove it. I have the VIN and the police report. Now move. Madison crossed her arms, still perched on the seat. You're crazy. My boyfriend bought this for me. Cut the crap, Madison. You cut the chain in my garage and took it. Even if I did, she said with a shrug, what are you going to do about it? The arrogance in her voice stopped me cold. She wasn't even denying it. She was daring me. I'm calling the police, I said, pulling out my phone. She laughed. Go ahead. My mom's on the HOA board. They won't do anything. That line, that smug, untouchable confidence, was gasoline on the fire. I dialed 911 right in front of her and told them exactly where I was and what I was looking at. The boys scattered before the cops arrived, but Madison stayed put, arms crossed, chin raised, like she was untouchable. 2 deputies pulled up 15 minutes later. I explained everything, pointed to the VIN number, and showed them the police report. This matches the one reported stolen, one deputy confirmed. Madison rolled her eyes. It's just a misunderstanding. Ma'am, the deputy said, this is a stolen vehicle. We're going to need you to come with us. You can't do that, she shouted. I'm a minor. You still committed a crime, he replied calmly. Karen arrived just as they were leading Madison to the cruiser, screeching like a banshee. What is going on here? She's being detained for possession of stolen property, the deputy explained. This is insane, Karen yelled. She's a child. You can't arrest her. She's 15, the deputy said. She's old enough to know better. Madison turned to her mom, tears welling in her eyes for the first time. Mom, do something. Karen glared at me across the clearing. You'll regret this, Daniel. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Oh, I think I do, I said quietly. As the squad car drove away with Madison in the back seat, a strange mix of satisfaction and dread settled over me. Part of me felt vindicated. Justice, at least for now, was being served. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to back down. And if I knew her at all, the real fight was just beginning. The neighborhood was never the same after that night. For the first time since I'd moved into Maplewood Estates, people didn't wave as I drove by. Neighbors I used to chat with at the mailbox now avoided eye contact, pretending to check their phones or hurry inside. Even Luke noticed the shift when he came home that weekend. Dad, he said one afternoon as we shot hoops in the driveway. Why is Mrs. Carter acting weird? She didn't even say hi. I bounced the ball back to him, forcing a smile. Some people just don't like getting involved in drama, but we didn't do anything wrong, he said, frowning. Madison stole our ATV. You're right, I told him, crouching to meet his eyes. We didn't do anything wrong, and we're not going to hide from anyone. Deal. He nodded, but I could tell the tension unsettled him. It unsettled me too. I'd been through war zones and messy divorces, but there's a special kind of discomfort that comes from feeling like your entire neighborhood is quietly turning against you. The following Monday, I got a knock on my door. When I opened it, Karen Monroe was standing there, sunglasses perched on her head, lips pressed into a thin, icy smile. She didn't wait for an invitation before stepping onto the porch. We need to talk, she said curtly. I crossed my arms. About what? About the stunt you pulled with my daughter. I exhaled slowly. You mean the part where she broke into my garage and stole my ATV? Her eyes narrowed. Watch your tone, Daniel. Madison made a mistake. She's a good kid who got caught up with the wrong crowd. She cut through a steel chain. Karen, that's not a mistake. That's a felony. Karen took a step closer, lowering her voice. She's 15. A juvenile. Do you really want to ruin a teenager's future over something like this? I stared at her, incredulous. She ruined it herself. Actions have consequences. Her mask slipped for a split second, revealing a flash of venom. Listen to me very carefully, she said, each word slow and deliberate. If you don't drop the charges, I will make your life here a living hell. I know the HOA bylaws inside and out. I know every member on the board. And believe me, they listen to me. I held her gaze, unflinching. Do whatever you want. I'm not letting a thief walk just because her mom is the HOA queen. She smirked then, not out of humor, but arrogance. We'll see about that. And with that, she turned on her heel and walked away. I closed the door, my heart pounding. I'd known Karen was capable of petty revenge, fines, complaints, maybe some gossip. But the way she said, living hell carried weight. It wasn't an empty threat. It was a promise. The retaliation began small, almost laughably so. 3 days later, I got a notice from the HOA citing me for a yard maintenance violation. Apparently, 2 of my hedges were overgrown by 2.5 inches beyond the acceptable length. The fine was $75. The next week, another letter arrived. This time it was about unauthorized storage of a recreational vehicle. They claimed my ATV, now safely back in my garage, wasn't permitted without prior board approval. $150 fine. Then came a citation for my trash can being visible from the street for too long. Another $100. It was death by 1,000 cuts, a steady stream of petty, ridiculous fines meant to bleed me dry and break my spirit. I appealed every one of them, and every time, the board, conveniently chaired by Karen, denied my appeals. Luke noticed the tension, too. One night, as we ate dinner at the kitchen table, he pushed his peas around with his fork and asked, "Dad, are we going to have to move?" My chest tightened. "No, buddy. We're not going anywhere. But everyone's being mean. Tommy said his mom told him not to hang out with me because you're a criminal." I felt something inside me crack at that. "We're not criminals," I said firmly. "We did the right thing. And sometimes, when you do the right thing, people who are wrong try to make you feel bad about it. That's on them, not us." He nodded, but his shoulders were slumped. It was one thing for me to deal with Karen's games, but seeing them spill over onto my kid, that lit a fire inside me. 2 weeks later, things escalated. I came home from work on a Friday to find an official-looking envelope taped to my door. Inside was a letter from the HOA informing me that they were holding a special hearing to discuss multiple repeated violations that could lead to lien action against my property if unresolved. I stared at the paper in disbelief. A lien? Over hedges and trash cans? I knew exactly who was behind it. That night, I sat on the porch long after Luke had gone to bed, nursing a beer and staring at the darkened street. I was tired, not just from the fines or the harassment, but from the gnawing sense that the system was stacked against me. Karen had power here, influence, friends on the board. And me? I was just the mechanic down the street with a kid and a garage full of tools. For the first time since this started, doubt crept in. Was I fighting a battle I couldn't win? The following afternoon, I decided I needed advice. I drove downtown to meet with a lawyer, an old friend from my Army days named Mike Delaney, who now handled property disputes and small claims cases. He listened patiently as I told him everything. The theft, the threats, the fines, the lien notice. "Sounds like she's weaponizing the HOA against you," he said, leaning back in his chair. "It's not uncommon. People like her thrive on control." "What can I do?" I asked. "First, document everything," he said. "Every notice, every fine, every conversation. If she's retaliating because of the criminal charges against her daughter, that's harassment. Possibly even grounds for a civil suit." I nodded, feeling a spark of hope for the first time in weeks. "Second," he continued, "don't back down. People like Karen expect you to fold under pressure. The moment you do, they win. Even if it means things get worse." He smiled grimly. "Oh, they will. But I've seen bullies like her before. They always push too far. And when they do, that's when we hit back." I left his office feeling steadier. Karen might have the HOA and half the neighborhood on her side, but I had the law, and I wasn't going down without a fight. The night of the HOA hearing was colder than usual, with a sharp wind cutting through the streets as I walked into the clubhouse. About 30 residents were gathered inside, murmuring quietly. At the front sat the board, 5 members, all neatly dressed, all wearing the same tight-lipped expressions. Karen sat in the center seat, a queen on her throne. "Mr. Carter," she said as I approached the podium. "Thank you for coming." "Didn't really have a choice," I muttered. The meeting began with the usual formalities before Karen launched into her accusations. Unkempt landscaping, trash violations, unapproved vehicle storage, disturbing the peace, with loud tools in my garage. She read each one aloud with relish, like a prosecutor in court. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath. "These violations are bogus," I said plainly. "They started after I pressed charges against your daughter for stealing my property. This isn't about hedges or trash cans. This is retaliation." A ripple went through the crowd. Karen's smile didn't waver. "That's quite an accusation, Mr. Carter." "It's not an accusation. It's the truth," I shot back. "And I have documentation to prove every single one of these so-called violations is fabricated or exaggerated." I laid the paperwork on the table, photos, timestamps, appeal letters. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, a soft-spoken man named David, cleared his throat. "Karen, some of these fines do seem excessive." Karen shot him a look sharp enough to cut glass. "Rules are rules," she said. "We must enforce them equally." "Equally," I said, laughing bitterly. Then why was Madison never cited for parking her boyfriend's truck on the grass? Or for leaving their garbage bins out for 2 days last month? The room fell silent. Karen's cheeks flushed crimson. "This meeting is not about my daughter," "Oh, but it is," I said, stepping closer. "It's always about your daughter. She breaks into my garage, steals my ATV, and suddenly I'm the villain. You think your HOA badge makes you untouchable? It doesn't." The tension was electric. You could hear a pin drop. Finally, David spoke again, quieter this time. "I think we need more time to review this before taking any further action." Karen opened her mouth to protest, but another board member cut her off. "I agree. Let's table this until next month." The gavel came down, and just like that, the hearing was adjourned. Karen stormed out without a word, her heels clicking like gunshots on the tile floor. I thought maybe, things would calm down after that. But I was wrong. The following week, Luke came home from school in tears. Someone had spray-painted Thief's son across his locker. His teacher said it was probably a prank, but I knew better. That night, I found a dead rat stuffed into my mailbox. Then someone keyed my truck. It was no longer about HOA fines. This was personal. I called the police again, but without proof, there was little they could do. "We'll keep an eye on the area," the officer said. "But unless we catch someone in the act." I hung up, frustration boiling over. They had stolen from me, harassed me, vandalized my property, and still, they walked free. But then, fate handed me an opportunity. One Friday evening, as I was reviewing the footage from a new security camera I'd installed by the garage, I caught something that made my blood run cold. There, clear as day, was Madison, sneaking into my driveway at 2 a.m., wearing a hoodie and trying to pry open the side gate. I stared at the screen, heart hammering. This wasn't just evidence. This was a smoking gun, and I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. The footage felt like a live wire in my hands. Cold, undeniable proof that Madison Monroe wasn't just some misguided teenager. She was bold, reckless, and still targeting me weeks after the first arrest. I replayed the video over and over again on my laptop, zooming in on her face as she crept into my driveway under the cover of darkness. It was her. No question. The timestamp showed 2:14 a.m., and the way she moved, darting glances over her shoulder before crouching at the side gate, screamed intent. This wasn't some prank. She was trying to break in again. I downloaded the footage, made 2 backup copies, and called the sheriff's office. This time, I didn't just file a report. I requested an officer come see the evidence in person. Deputy Harris, the same calm young officer from the night my ATV vanished, arrived within the hour. I played the footage on the big screen in my living room. He watched silently, arms crossed. "Yeah," he said finally, nodding. "That's Madison Monroe, all right." "She was trying to get back in," I said. "Probably to mess with the ATV again, or worse." Harris sighed. "This is attempted breaking and entering. Even as a juvenile, that's serious. And given the ongoing case with the stolen ATV, this strengthens everything." "Can you arrest her?" "We can bring her in for questioning," he said. "But I'll be honest with you, Daniel, her mom's already got lawyers crawling all over the original case. They're trying to spin it as a misunderstanding, a joyride gone wrong." "Joyride?" I barked out a bitter laugh. "She cut through a steel chain and stole a $9,000 machine." "I know," he said, raising a hand. "But you'd be surprised how these things go. This footage changes the game, though. It shows intent and a pattern." "Then let's move," I said. "What do you need from me?" "Just a sworn statement," Harris replied. "We'll handle the rest." The next 48 hours were a blur of paperwork, calls, and waiting. I didn't tell Luke about the new footage. No sense worrying him more than he already was. But I did notice how he started double-checking the locks at night, how he hesitated before riding his bike down the street. Madison's actions weren't just criminal. They were poisoning the peace we'd built here. On the third night, the knock came again, not from Karen this time, but from 2 sheriff's deputies. "Mr. Carter," one said, "we wanted to let you know we're executing a juvenile apprehension order tonight. We'll be bringing Madison Monroe in for questioning based on the new evidence." "Good," I said, my jaw tight. "It's about time." They left, and I stood at the window, heart pounding, watching the street. Part of me wanted to be there when they showed up at Karen's door. Part of me wanted to hear her excuses crumble. I didn't have to wait long. At around 9:40 p.m., Two cruisers rolled silently into Maplewood Estates, their lights off. They parked outside the Monroe house and approached the door. Even from my window, I could hear Karen's shrill voice pierce the night. "This is harassment," she was screaming. "She's a child. She's a repeat offender," one deputy replied calmly. "Ma'am, please step aside." Moments later, Madison emerged, hoodie pulled over her head, eyes darting nervously. For once, the cocky smirk was gone. The girl who had once laughed in my face now looked like a cornered animal. As they guided her into the cruiser, she spotted me standing across the street. Our eyes met for a heartbeat. Hers were wide, panicked, furious. "This isn't over," she shouted as they closed the door. Karen turned next, and if looks could kill, I'd have dropped dead on the spot. "You think you've won?" she hissed across the yard. "You've just declared war." "Then I guess we're at war," I called back. The cruisers pulled away, taillights glowing red in the dark. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt like justice was within reach. But deep down, I also knew Karen wasn't bluffing. And when people like her feel their control slipping, they don't retreat, they escalate. I was right. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. Spray painted across my garage door in thick, dripping red letters were the words: "Rat. Liar. Get out." Neighbors slowed their morning walks to stare, whispering behind their hands. Luke stood on the driveway, his backpack hanging limply at his side. "Dad," he whispered. "Who did this?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Doesn't matter," I said. "We'll paint over it." But it did matter. It mattered a hell of a lot. Someone had crossed a line. This wasn't fines or gossip. This was intimidation. I filed another police report, but without video proof, the vandalism case went nowhere. Still, I wasn't done fighting back. I upgraded my security system. 8 cameras, motion sensors, floodlights, the works. If they so much as stepped on my property again, I'd have footage from 6 angles. The tension in Maplewood grew thicker by the day. Karen stopped pretending to be civil. She'd glare at me from her front porch, bark orders at her friends on the HOA board, and whisper loudly whenever I walked by. Then came the emergency HOA meeting. I got the notice on a Thursday, due to ongoing disputes and incidents involving resident Daniel Carter. The board will hold a vote on potential HOA enforcement actions, including but not limited to property liens and mandatory compliance orders. Mandatory compliance orders. That was code for they're going to try to force me out. The clubhouse was packed that night. Karen sat at the front like a judge presiding over a trial. Madison wasn't there, still under juvenile supervision, but her absence only seemed to harden Karen's resolve. "This community is under threat," she began, her voice ringing out across the room. "Our peace, our safety, and our reputation are being jeopardized by one resident's reckless behavior." I couldn't help but laugh. "My reckless behavior?" "Yes, yours," she snapped. "Your false accusations, your harassment of a minor, your escalating conflict with this board. It's creating division and chaos in Maplewood." I stepped forward, gripping the edge of the podium. "Let me make one thing clear. I didn't start this. Your daughter broke into my garage and stole my property. Then she came back and tried again. I have the footage. The police have the footage. That's not harassment. That's evidence." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. One board member, David again, cleared his throat. "Karen, with respect, the footage is legitimate. The sheriff's office confirmed as much." Karen shot him a glare. "We're not here to debate the details of an ongoing legal matter. We're here because Mr. Carter's behavior is damaging our community." I clenched my jaw. "You mean because I refuse to be bullied?" "You've brought police into our neighborhood twice," she said, her voice rising. "You've turned Maplewood into a circus. Property values are dropping. People are afraid. They're afraid because of you." I fired back. "Because you think your daughter is untouchable. Because you think HOA rules make you above the law. Well, newsflash, they don't." The room erupted into overlapping shouts, some siding with her, others with me. The board scrambled to regain control, but the damage was done. The clean, polite veneer of Maplewood had cracked, revealing the ugliness underneath. "Order," the chair shouted, banging his gavel. "We're voting now. The motion was to pursue a mandatory compliance order and possible lien if I failed to cooperate with community standards. It was a sham vote, Karen's way of squeezing me financially until I broke. The tally was close. Too close. 3 votes for the motion. 2 against. The motion passed. I walked out of that meeting numb. Karen had just declared all-out war, and she was winning. The next few days were hell. Notices piled up on my doorstep. Anonymous notes with words like snitch and move out appeared in my mailbox. One night, Luke woke up crying after someone pounded on our front door and ran off into the darkness. But I wasn't about to fold. Not now. Not after everything they'd done. I filed a harassment complaint against Karen with the county. I sent copies of the video footage and the vandalism report to the district attorney handling Madison's case. I even reached out to a local reporter I knew from a veterans outreach program, hinting at a story about HOA abuse and juvenile crime cover-ups. And then, something unexpected happened. Deputy Harris called me one afternoon. "Daniel," he said, "you might want to sit down." "Why? What's going on?" Madison confessed. I blinked. "What?" she cracked during questioning. "Admitted to breaking into your garage, stealing the ATV, trying to get back in later. She even bragged about how her mom would fix everything. We've got it all on record." For a moment, I couldn't speak. "What does that mean?" "It means the DA is filing formal charges," he said. "Grand theft, attempted breaking and entering, and criminal mischief. Because she's a minor, it'll go through juvenile court. But given the pattern, the judge isn't likely to go easy." "And Karen?" Harris hesitated. "Well, that's the interesting part. Madison also admitted her mom knew she took the ATV and told her to hide it. That could lead to charges of parental negligence or obstruction. It's being reviewed." I sank into a chair, exhaling a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. For the first time in months, the tide was turning. The day of the juvenile hearing was gray and cold, rain spitting against the courthouse steps as I walked inside. Luke stayed home with my sister. I didn't want him anywhere near this. But Karen and Madison were there, flanked by a high-priced attorney and looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Madison avoided my gaze. Karen didn't. She stared daggers at me the entire time, lips pursed, jaw tight. The hearing was short but devastating. The judge reviewed the evidence: the original theft, the cut chain, the recovered ATV, the new footage from my driveway, and Madison's own confession. He wasn't amused. "Miss Monroe," he said sternly, "your actions show a troubling disregard for property, law, and accountability. You are fortunate this is juvenile court." Madison mumbled something under her breath, but the judge silenced her with a glare. "You are sentenced to 200 hours of community service, mandatory counseling, and 6 months probation. If you violate any terms of this probation, you will face juvenile detention." Karen shot to her feet. "This is outrageous." "Sit down, Mrs. Monroe," the judge said sharply. "Your daughter is not the victim here." Silence fell over the courtroom. Madison's attorney tried to spin the narrative, but the damage was done. The ruling was final. As we filed out into the rain, Karen brushed past me, stopping just long enough to whisper in my ear. "This isn't over," she said. "Not by a long shot." I turned to her, my voice calm and steady. "Maybe not. But for the first time, Karen, it's not me who should be worried." But even as I drove home that day, windshield wipers thumping against the storm, I knew this wasn't the end. People like Karen didn't know how to lose. They just regrouped, recalculated, and came back meaner. And something told me her next move would be the most dangerous yet. The war wasn't over. It was about to reach its final, brutal stage. The morning of the sentencing dawned gray and heavy, as if the sky itself carried the weight of everything that had happened. Daniel Carter stood in front of the mirror, tugging at the collar of a shirt he hadn't worn since his wife's funeral. Crisp white, stiff at the edges, too formal for a man who preferred grease-stained flannel and work boots. But today wasn't about comfort. Today was about closure. Luke shuffled into the kitchen, still rubbing sleep from his eyes. "You think they'll actually do time, Dad?" he asked, grabbing a granola bar from the counter. Daniel paused, considering his answer carefully. "I don't know, kiddo. Madison's young, and Karen's got money." But he looked at his son, whose face had grown harder, older in these past months. "We told the truth. We fought for what was right. That's what matters." The boy nodded, quiet but resolute. Daniel felt a pang of pride and guilt. This wasn't the summer Luke should have had. There should have been bonfires and fishing trips and laughter. Instead, there'd been police reports, courtroom hearings, and whispered gossip from neighbors who once waved as they passed, but now crossed the street. By the time they reached the courthouse, a crowd had already gathered. Reporters with cameras clustered near the steps, their breath puffing in the cool air as they jostled for space. Madison's case had blown up online. HOA Queen's daughter steals neighbor's ATV, and the local news couldn't get enough of it. A stolen ATV might not be national news, but the image of a smug teenager flaunting privilege and consequence had struck a nerve. Karen and Madison arrived minutes later, flanked by an attorney in a $1,000 suit. Karen wore oversized sunglasses and a navy pantsuit that screamed politician's wife, chin lifted defiantly, as if she were stepping into a fundraiser, not a courtroom. Madison looked smaller than Daniel remembered. Gone was the cocky smirk. Her hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her hands trembled as she clutched a water bottle. The bailiff called everyone to order. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with quiet tension as the judge, a stern woman with iron-gray hair, took her seat. Testimonies had been heard weeks ago. Evidence presented. Today was about consequences. "Madison Reynolds," the judge began, her voice steady and cutting through the room. "You have been found guilty of theft, property damage, and obstruction of justice." Karen reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand, eyes fixed on the judge with a practiced mask of composure. "You showed a pattern of reckless behavior," the judge continued. "You attempted to avoid responsibility, and you endangered others. However, given your age and lack of prior record," she paused, and the room held its breath. "The court sentences you to 9 months in a juvenile detention facility, followed by community service and probation." Karen shot up from her seat. "9 months? Your Honor, my daughter is." "Sit down, Mrs. Reynolds," the judge said without looking up. "This is my courtroom. Your daughter is not above the law." The gavel cracked once, echoing like thunder. It was done. Madison broke then, tears spilling down her cheeks as a deputy gently led her from the courtroom. Karen remained frozen, knuckles white around her designer handbag, lips pressed so tight they'd gone pale. Daniel exhaled slowly. Relief washed through him, but it wasn't triumphant. It was heavy, messy. Justice had been served, yes, but it didn't feel clean. Nothing about this had been clean. Outside, reporters swarmed. Microphones thrust forward. "Mr. Carter, do you feel justice was done?" "I just want to move on," Daniel said, guiding Luke through the crowd. This was never about revenge. But as they reached the parking lot, a familiar voice stopped them cold. "You think this is over, Daniel?" Karen's voice was low and sharp, like a blade at his back. He turned. She'd removed the sunglasses now, and the mask of composure had cracked. Fury simmered in her eyes. "You humiliated my family. You turned the entire neighborhood against us. Your daughter stole from me," Daniel replied, struggling to keep his voice calm. "Actions have consequences." Karen took a step closer, lowering her voice. "This isn't finished. You don't know who you're dealing with." Daniel stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head. "That's the problem, Karen." "I do." He walked away before she could say another word. The weeks that followed felt strangely quiet. Without the daily battles, the hearings, and the neighborhood drama, the silence felt unfamiliar. Luke started smiling again. They took the ATV, repaired and freshly painted, out for a ride on the trails beyond town. They stopped for burgers at Miller's Diner. For the first time in months, they laughed without glancing over their shoulders. Daniel even started rebuilding bridges. Some neighbors, shamed by how they'd stayed silent, stopped by with casseroles or awkward apologies. Others kept their distance. That was fine. He wasn't looking for a popularity contest. He was just trying to build something like peace. But peace has a way of slipping through your fingers just when you start to trust it. It started small. A letter in the mailbox, an HOA violation notice for a non-compliant fence. Daniel frowned. His fence was the same it had been for years, inspected and approved. A week later, another notice, unauthorized structure for the small shed where he kept tools. Then came the fine, $1,200. He knew exactly who was behind it. Dad, Luke said one evening as they sat on the porch, the sun sinking low behind the oaks. She's trying to mess with us again, isn't she? Daniel sighed. Yeah, looks like it. What are we gonna do? He stared out at the yard, jaw tight. We fight it, like we always do. But Karen wasn't just filing complaints. Rumors were spreading again. Whispers about how Daniel had overreacted, how he'd ruined a young girl's life over a toy. At the grocery store, he caught people staring. At the post office, someone muttered snitch under their breath. The neighborhood had split into camps. Some stood by him. Others circled the wagons around Karen. And in the middle of it all, Daniel felt the walls closing in again. Then, one evening, everything changed. It was late, past 11, when the knock came at the door. Daniel, half asleep on the couch, jolted upright. Luke was already in bed. He walked to the door, cautious, and peered through the peephole. Two sheriff's deputies stood on the porch. Heart thudding, he opened the door. Officers, what's going on? Mr. Carter, one asked. We have a warrant to search your property. Daniel blinked. What? The deputy handed him a folded paper. We received a report of stolen property matching a description connected to an ongoing investigation. We need to take a look. Stolen property? Daniel's voice rose. What are you talking about? But they were already moving. Flashlights swept across his yard. Another deputy appeared from around the side of the house, radio crackling. Daniel followed them, his mind racing. This had to be a mistake. A misunderstanding. Maybe a neighbor's tools had gone missing again. Maybe. Sir, one deputy called. Can you explain this? He turned and froze. There, behind the shed, half buried beneath a tarp, was a stack of electronics, tablets, headphones, even a drone, all tagged with serial numbers. Items Daniel had never seen in his life. What the hell, he whispered. That's not mine. I swear that's not mine. The deputies exchanged a look. We're going to need you to come with us, sir. Wait, no? I didn't put that there. His heart hammered against his ribs. I've been set up. But they were already reading him his rights. Luke's terrified face was the last thing Daniel saw as they led him to the cruiser. The boy pressed his hands to the window, shouting, He didn't do anything. My dad didn't do anything. Back at the station, the interrogation was a blur. Questions, accusations, evidence bags. Daniel's words tumbled out. About Karen, about the feud, about Madison. Some detectives listened. Others didn't bother hiding their skepticism. By dawn, he was sitting in a holding cell, head in his hands, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Exhaustion pressed on him, heavy and merciless. Hours later, a deputy appeared at the bars. Mr. Carter, you're free to go. Daniel stared at him. What? Anonymous tip. Security footage from a neighbor's camera. Shows someone else sneaking around your shed last night. Someone else? The deputy shrugged. Can't say more. Investigation's ongoing. Daniel walked out of the station, dazed. The air felt colder than it should have. Luke ran to him the second he stepped outside, throwing his arms around his waist. I knew you didn't do it, the boy whispered. Daniel hugged him back, but his mind was elsewhere. Someone had planted that evidence. Someone had tried to destroy him, and he didn't need a name to know who. A week later, an unmarked envelope appeared in his mailbox. No return address. Inside, a single photograph, grainy, black and white, taken from what looked like a security camera. It showed Karen, in the dead of night, dragging a box toward his shed. No note. No threat. Just the image. Daniel stared at it for a long time. Then he smiled. Not a happy smile, but a tired, dangerous one. The game had changed. Karen had drawn her line in the sand. And this time, Daniel wasn't just going to defend his peace. He was going to end this war, once and for all. If you enjoyed this intense story, smash that like button and subscribe for more gripping, cinematic tales. Don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss the next thriller. Your support keeps these stories coming.